I'm joined now by Dr. T.K. Pooe from the Wits School of Governance. A very good afternoon to you, Dr. Pooe. Thanks very much for your time. But is there more really to this than simply a reassignment, of taking these SOEs where they rightfully belong?
No, thanks for having me. Look, I think we probably have to take them individually, but looking at Eskom, I think it does kind of show the growing prowess of the current minister and his job. And secondly, it's actually a directive from the ANC in 2022, and the conferences that were supposed to go back to line ministries. But if you're asking, is there more? I think it probably historically speaks to the problem the ANC has had with SOEs, which is, look, I've always said this, the SOEs are not necessarily a problem. It's just that they've been poorly governed over the last 3 decades. So it's just another attempt at trying to resolve the problem. And for me, I think it's good in part, but I think it still misses a greater point, which is what is the vision for SOEs in the country and how we actively putting policies and institutions in place? Because even for Eskom, giving it to a line ministry, while it's fair, and again, the minister speaks about it being a shareholder, there's questions then of capacity, which is, does his ministry have the relevant individuals within the ministry to be able to look after Eskom? And remember, Eskom is no longer just one entity. It's been divided up into 3 sections. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one is also put together. So I think it's, again, another example of, especially on the side of the ANC in the coalition government, them trying to make an attempt again to see what they can do with state-owned entities without a clear overall vision.
Well, I can't help but, because, there's so many things that the ANC resolved to do, which it hasn't done. And, state banks and, all the stuff under, it's a radical economic transformation program. But I won't get us into that conversation for now. But touch on an issue you raised, which is the poor management of state-owned entities across the board, and whether reassigning them actually deals with that problem.
No, it doesn't. If you go back to, I think it's termed the Pietha report, but it was a report under then President Jacob Zuma, which looked at the entirety of South Africa's commercial, which is just state-owned companies and state-owned entities and enterprises. And it actually came to, it's a rather voluminous document, but I think it came to the same argument I'm making, which is to say there needs to be a whole rethinking in terms of what you do with them. For instance, on the commercial side of entities such as Eskom and maybe your Transnet, I think more hands-on approach is needed. And the key issue there should be probably going for a management structure, which is, again, there's many different ways you can do this, which is a bit more professional, almost one could say not privatized, but probably a private form of ownership in terms of a board, making sure that you've got the relevant experiences. And then there is questions of what do you do with provincial state-owned entities? In a country where you've just discussed the issue of lots of municipalities failing their audit outcomes. I don't think certain municipalities should have state-owned entities under them. So again, it's a key question of we've never really sat down to say, what do you want to do with state-owned entities as other countries have had? Because the reason why state-owned entities became so much is there's never been a big vision of it. I've just always made the argument that you need to make it clear a clear delineation between those that are commercial, which is those are supposed to help South Africa's industrialization and South Africa's move towards being a true hegemon in the region of SADC. Those ones we need to be supporting by even going a bit further on to say, how do we make you world-class institutions? Then they're the ones at provincial and local government where we're supposed to be asking the question, should we not be maybe getting rid of them and putting them into different hands? And I think until we have those conversations concrete and to the point, we're going to always have this debate, which is, okay, this year they're doing this, next year they're doing this. But the poor thing is, the longer you do this without a clear plan, the more they move back and become uncompetitive entities.
Add to that, I remember when arguments were made for healthy remuneration, of the people who lead these SOEs, and their executives, and everyone else at the top. An argument that was made was that because they need to be competitive, they must be well run by people who know what they're doing. But you look at the experiences, many of whom have come through at the state capture inquiry. You then wonder whether we in fact stick to the things or the reasons we usually advance for taking particular decisions. And I fear that this may just be one of those. In other words, a box will have been ticked, but it may just have the opposite effect.
Exactly, and especially one when it comes to energy, because the question I think we should be asking, if we read reports from the 1980s, especially as it relates to ESCOM, there were already plans afoot where ESCOM was supposed to be putting in gas, tapping in gas from Angola and Mozambique into South Africa. But again, because of the inefficiencies and because, look, when they did have great leadership in the form of people like Rolo Khoza and the like, and Mr. Jacob Moroka, they did not follow through. It means that, again, like you're putting it correctly, it almost means as though they're not really addressing the advancement of a certain state-owned commercial entity. They're simply saying, listen, how do we plug and play and fix it? And I think it does South Africans a disservice because, again, the debate, and this is where I always have great arguments with many commentators and even entities and political parties such as the Democratic Alliance, because the world over, state-owned entities are now proving to be quite critical towards economic advancement. The OECD 2 or 3 years ago released a document which actually showed that, listen, of the top 100 or 200 companies in the world, about what, 30, if not 20% of them are state-owned entities. So it shows you that there's value in having state-owned entities that operate correctly. Unfortunately, in South Africa, the debate is never how do we get them to be world class. It's always how do we get them such that we can clear up the mess which was previously created by the same individuals that come up with the same plan. So the hope, and again, one must always be hopeful with these things, is that, look, maybe this could be a new dawn, and I'm not using it because of the regime in place, but I'm saying maybe this could be a new dawn to be able to say, let's actually have the debate now. Let's actually look at making state-owned entities competitive and world class, so that energy prices in South Africa can come down. Let's make sure Transnet gets the same support such that we can actually have a railway system that works and it is efficient and eventually have public transport in the country. But unfortunately, I don't hear these debates coming. I still think we're still clutching at straws because we don't have an overall strategy for state-owned entities.
So I guess the question then is isn't whether the debate should be about this or that, but whether there are debates at all.
I have not seen them. Look, I do know that there was a Presidential State-Owned Entities Council, PSEC, and I do know that documents are supposed to come out about what they feel is a view of where they should be going. But I always go back to the Piecha report. It was already set out in stone what needed to be done, but there's never really been the point. And I think the best place to start, if they were going to be serious about saying, how do we have this debate, is let's start at local government level. How many of those state-owned entities do we honestly need for certain of those municipalities? I think I would argue 80% of them we can actually get rid of. And then the ones that are remaining, the key proviso should be, are they assisting in making sure that we have three things? One, we have rural development, because I think sometimes we do forget that people in rural areas, such as the Eastern Cape, places like Limpopo, Free State, and the like, those areas don't necessarily have the correct, I would say, ratio of private sector money involved in them. They need, industrious types of state-owned entities. And then there should be the question, and I think you don't hear this debate, is a lot of the commercial state-owned entities we have should be competing on the continent in SADC, making sure that we have industrialization in places like Namibia, Zimbabwe, and the like, so that it can actually make sure that those places take off. Because South Africa cannot be the only country that does well economically in the region in the absence of those. And this is where we're supposed to use our state-owned entities. But again, that's the debate I am not hearing. We're simply hearing an issue of, we're not putting the right managers in place. And if that's the only argument you're having, it tells me that you're missing the vision and the policy imperative of what state-owned entities are supposed to be doing.
Dr. Pooe, thanks very much for your time. He's from the Wits School of Governance, specialist in public policy.